Hey gang, so a few weeks ago, I posted up a video that I promised wasn't clickbait. But if I'm being honest, it actually was bait. And I've been involved in Star Citizen for a long time and kind of heavily involved in this sort of day to day, obviously, since I do the roadmap tracker and everything. But I was curious about having an actual honest conversation with people who are vehemently opposed to it. And that's why I kind of figured that titling a video Scam Citizen would bring them out and actually be able to engage them. So I kind of wanted to see if there was anything CIG could do that could possibly win them back, or more just sort of see their reasoning and sort of see where their heads are at. And I kind of figured there were certain groups, and by and large, some of that was verified, some of it wasn't. And so I kind of wanted to get into that and kind of consider this a burn down on that video, which I was always planning on doing. But in this sense, I just kind of want to get out there. I don't see this being a very long one. You might notice I'm wearing a different hat right now, and I swear this is relevant. So let's get into why after the break. Okay, so I don't think that this will be too long. It's not an extremely difficult concept to grasp. It's just it's got a little bit of visual. So you'll notice I have the Cintiq out here. And let's just kind of call this the Wish knockoff version of the real thing. So this isn't going to be a really deep dive, just sort of broad strokes. I'm going to start with something that's relatively neutral, at least when it comes to Star Citizen, where it comes to fandoms and engagement. Okay, so let's start with an onion model, which looks like this for obvious reasons. And actually, I am going to pull myself out of this corner here because I got a couple of visuals that are going to show up here, and also so that I can stay on script so that I don't blow this thing up like I usually do. Those of you who have been here for a while know what I'm talking about. Okay, so again, this is an onion model. So at the center, at the most engagement possible, which is this sort of line or this circle right here, this is the organization in itself. So in this case, let's think of this as the Seahawks. So sports ball. Moving out from one layer on the onion, you'll find the fans. So fans comes from fanatic. That's where fans come from. And these are the people that ride or die for the team. So the team can do no wrong. The team will win the Super Bowl every single year, no matter how much they actually suck. Every loss is because the refs screwed them and not because they were outplayed or outcoached. So you get the idea. Fanatics are fanatics. So next ring out, you got supporters. So supporters, these are the people who like the team. They'll root for them. They want them to succeed, but they're not down in like the day-to-day minutia. If the team loses, it won't ruin their whole week, although they might be a little disappointed on Monday. So one more ring further out, and you have people who are disengaged. These are people that know about the team. They know the team exists. They might have a slight idea of what football is, but they can certainly watch and enjoy a game, but it's not something they need in their life. They will happily go and do anything else if it comes up. And finally, the last ring, I'll just call these haters. So these are people that are engaged with the team, but in a negative way. So they are just as engaged as the fanatics, but on the flip side of the coin. For this analogy, you can think of them as fans of, let's say, rival teams. In addition to being fans of their own teams, they may actually want to see this team fail, implode, be the worst in the league, be plagued with injuries, and so on. So it's not enough to just like their own team or just join the ranks of the disengaged. They have to take an active antagonistic role to this team's existence. For both the fans and the haters, this is their identity. The fans are the stalwart defenders. You can think of them as white knights. The haters are intractable antagonists. You can probably see where this is going, so let's change it up. So let's replace the Seahawks with this. So again, the same rungs of the onion apply. You got your white knights here. You have your people who are relatively casual but enjoy the game. You have people who might have played it 5 to 10 years ago but haven't logged on since. And if somebody were to say, oh, hey, have you played Star Citizen? They'll be like, oh, yeah, is that still going? I thought they went under, or they got sued out of oblivion, or I thought they gave up, or I thought it was got termed a scam or something like that. So they're aware of the project. They just haven't engaged with it. And then, of course, you have your haters. And these are people who actively want the project, CIG, and especially Chris Roberts and sometimes Sandy Roberts, to just be burned to the ground. What was interesting in my little, let's call it an experiment here, was that I generally figured a lot of the latter crowd, so these haters, would react to the scam vid, and that was kind of the point. But rather than clicks, what I really wanted was discussions. So not surprisingly, there were more than a few who clearly hadn't played the game, or at least hadn't played the game for several years, complaining about bugs that really haven't been an issue for at least half a decade, as opposed to the ones that actually plague the game right now. And yeah, of course, there were people who just replied to the title and never watched the vid at all. I mean, that's kind of what YouTube is, and nothing I can do about that. But what surprised me, and honestly shouldn't have, was that many of these people, at least in my tiny sample size, had been backers at one point. And if their comments were to be believed, and I had no reason not to believe them, they were probably large backers and pretty loyal backers early on. And a lot of this crowd seemed to check out when a certain person was banned from Spectrum, was refunded, and rose to a huge stink about it. And just kind of a reminder to those that don't like He Who Shall Not Be Named, he was an original backer of this project and really wanted to see it succeed. But he definitely went toxic first chance he got. Not totally without reason. So looking back on it, maybe a little bit of his rage was justifiable, and maybe CIG overreacted, but maybe not. It's hard to say. The project was a lot more vulnerable to bad press back then, and that certain person had a pretty big megaphone that he was using pretty regularly to bash the project. And I can say, because of him, that no small number of people who had never played the game at all were influenced by both that situation and that megaphone, as well as toxic hit pieces from Kotaku. But not all of the criticisms that came out at that time were unjustified. Some people's anger came from a real place as the scope of the project grew exponentially with the introduction of Planet Tech and several other features they just kept adding. As opposed to getting a small, reasonable game in just a few years, the project began to look bloated, and a delivery date began to realistically crawl out past a decade. And again, justifiably, some of these people felt burned. Rather than just join the ranks of the disengaged, they decided to join the ranks of the haters to warn other people away from the project and even to actively root for it to fail. But another thing came out of these discussions that I'm actually kind of glad happened. Despite this feeling and their slide to opposition to Cloud Imperium games and Star Citizen, a few seemed willing to come back to the project if some tangible evidence were given that some of the goals, any of the big goals, were met. Be that the actual launch of Squadron 42, or finally delivering Pyro and a second system to the Verse, or any other of the big promised ticket items that had been around for years. So that's heartening, but CIG should take note that there is a clock ticking out there, and it seems, I think it's reasonable to say that that is different for each person. And it's important to note that no one is more effective at being a hater than a former fan. So finally, I want to close this vid on this. While I like the Seahawks, and I certainly follow them and root for them, I'm a supporter, not a fanatic. If the team loses, it sucks in the moment, but it doesn't ruin my day or even my week. Life goes on. So while there are definitely things in your life that you should take that seriously, a video game probably isn't one of them. You can be a fan or a hater, just don't make it your entire identity. Don't make defending this project at all costs the core of your identity. Don't make tearing it down the core of your identity. And I think that's all I have for this one, guys. So like and subscribe if you haven't already, and catch me next time.